Look at these pretty flowers. Oh, don't forget that. Hi. Hello. I'm filming a Q&A video, but it's not going to be a traditional, like, I'm sitting down at a chair and answering all of your questions because I'm too busy for that shit. So what I'm gonna do is throughout just my days, I'm gonna be answering questions. Starting off, I woke up this morning and am reading Consumed by Aja Barber. Incredible. Highly recommend. Because I'm reading this book, I wanted to answer some questions about sustainable fashion. And thanks to you all for submitting questions. I'm just gonna like sit and answer some of them. Can you address hyperconsumption regarding sustainable brands and shopping? Absolutely. So there's this very interesting phenomenon happening right now where a lot of brands, consumers, influencers continue to hyper consume, especially as, you know, you come across on Instagram, whether that's an influencer or just like somebody doing a haul or whatever it is, are using the same habits to shop for sustainable fashion or thrifted fashion than they would with fast fashion. And the reality is that's not sustainable at all. We cannot continue to buy and buy and buy and then donate or throw away clothing after it's no longer trendy or no longer, you know, usable to you, or you just don't like it anymore. It's frustrating seeing people continue to purchase at the same like habit level, even if they're purchasing more sustainable clothing. But at the end of the day, the consumption is the problem. Buying 5 or 6 or 7 new garments anytime there's a sale, that's the problem. Even like thrift hauls of buying like 10 new pieces, new to you, you know, still secondhand pieces, is still an example of fueling overconsumption. And if we really actually want to have a chance at changing the fashion industry and like making sure that the planet is still habitable, we have to start with our habits and our consumption. So one way that we can start to address that is really like pausing and taking time to learn and understand what the realities of the fashion industry are and who faces the consequences. I was just reading and Consumed that a lot of our secondhand clothing, you know, by our, I mean in America or other parts of the global north, end up going to places in the global south. So the example here was given a market in Ghana, and the market is called Contamanto, and essentially there are bales and bales full of secondhand clothing that are brought to these markets that must then be sifted through. You know, the good pieces are pulled out and then, you know, sold, but they're sold at super low prices so that they are hardly even profitable. And then if those aren't sold, then they end up going into a landfill. The notion that a fashion giant like H&M or Zara can create so many items just to be worn by consumers like maybe once or twice and then get sent to a place like this market, and then the people in Ghana or other people in the global south then have to take responsibility of all of the waste that come along with fast fashion, or even, you know, if it's hyper consumed sustainable fashion. So we gotta really work on reducing our consumption, analyzing our habits, analyzing our spending habits. Why are we purchasing so much? Finding your style, like your true style, what clothing pieces or what designs or what colors make you feel like your truest self, so that you understand, instead of just hopping on every single trend, you have your base wardrobe that you really love, that you are really excited to wear, and you're not necessarily going out and buying new things all the time. Okay, another question I got: how to respond when your friend gets excited to shop fast fashion and not sound judgy. One thing you could potentially do is say something along the lines of, hey, I really wish that I could go with you next time you're shopping, but I'm not really comfortable going to fast fashion places, but maybe we can plan a thrift shopping trip soon. I've never tested that out before, so if you are testing it out, let me know how it works and leave a comment below so that I can recommend it to other people if it works. Another question that I got, this one is not super fashion related, but it kind of is too. This question is, when did you start your minimalism journey? Any tips? So I started it in college and like have to pack up all my shit every single year, and I hated having to do that and just like carrying extra junk around that like didn't really serve me. So moving around a lot will definitely do that to you. But after a while of really like learning and understanding the point of minimalism, which is really to live more slowly and live more intentionally, you really start to gain space in your life for things that like actually matter to you. So instead of spending tons and tons of time decluttering your room or like cleaning up your room because you have so many things lying around, you can spend that time like reading or going for a walk or, you know, doing whatever it is that you want to do. And honestly, minimalism is what works for you. If you're not interested in only like owning 10 things or owning, you know, only things that can fit into a single backpack, that's okay. I'm not that person either. Yeah, working towards minimizing as much as possible into the things that you really truly love, into the ones that bring you joy, I think is always a good place to start. So yeah, that's it for now. I'm gonna do some work because I really should get started. But I will check in with you all with the next group of questions. Okay, it is the next day again. I am really bad at sitting down and doing a bunch of these. I am waiting for my laundry to be done, so I figured now would be a good time to answer some of the questions about sustainability. One question is, what's one of the most challenging sustainable swaps for you to make, and any advice? More than anything, a big learning lesson of mine has been to not sweat the small stuff, because it's really, really easy to get bogged down into like the tiny little things and the little plastic rings that come around the glass jars, or, you know, your barista accidentally giving you a paper coffee cup even though you brought your reusable and you literally handed it to them. So I would say, like, when I first started my sustainability journey, that was the biggest learning lesson, because I would just get really anxious or upset at like the small things that I couldn't necessarily always control. And I know it's not like maybe an answer that you were looking for in terms of like the one thing, like the one product or the one part of my life, but that's my reality, and I know that it's a reality for a lot of other people as well. So I hope that you are at least able to take my learnings and my experience and apply it to your life. Questions. Okay. Sustainability means so much to me, but it's so hard to see the point of individual action when the government and corporations are the problem. How do you grapple with this? Great question. Yes, it is difficult at times. It really has to be a combination. Like, it can't just be the governments and the corporations. They're not going to change unless we talk about it, because like brands and companies and governments will follow what the people want. And if the people are not like showing that they are like actually taking this seriously and this is what we want, and doing so by catering our habits and our like day-to-day life to one that does have a lower impact, they're not going to see the point of changing. And the way that we can tell them to change is by voting with our dollars for people who have like the privilege to be able to choose the more sustainable or like lower waste options, and like use our voices to email companies and email brands and let them know that like, hey, we want to support you, but like you're doing that practice that doesn't feel right, so we want you to change it, otherwise I'm going to take my business elsewhere. So it really has to be a combination of both us using our voices for change and governments and corporations to actually implement the change. Another thing that I try to remind myself of is the ripple effect and the importance of how you can influence positive change in others simply by living your life in a way that aligns with your values. So I have long given up like trying to force people to change, because I know that doesn't work, and in fact probably does the opposite. But I do know that if I'm doing my own thing and I can show people how easy it is to make a simple swap, and they then feel empowered to make that change in their life, that's a change that they weren't making before I you know, influenced them. And it doesn't have to be just an influencer who does that. It could be you inspiring your friend to change, or your mom, or your cousin, or whoever it is, to just start with something, and then maybe they will then inspire somebody in their life. So I think that's often forgotten when we talk about sustainability, but it's also really, really important to acknowledge. A couple other questions I got, not necessarily about sustainability, but about living in New York, which I think is cool. Somebody said, did you consciously choose to live in Brooklyn, or did you end up there? What do you like about it? And one person similarly asked, I know you've been in New York for years, but how was the transition when you first moved? Well, obviously it's not the cheapest place to live. I had wanted to move to New York for several months already, so I was really excited when I finally got here. I don't think there was too much of a transition outside of just like finding my places, the spots I like to go to for, you know, my favorite farmers markets, and like co-ops and places that I could buy things in bulk, and like my favorite coffee shops and things. So, you know, it was a transition like any other, but I was so excited to be here that it didn't even really feel difficult or anything. I mean, obviously there were points that were difficult, especially when I was looking for a job, but yeah, it's been great. In terms of what I like about living here, there are so many things to do, like at all times. Always there's a farmer's market happening, or there's an event, or there's a museum to go to, or there's a coffee shop that needs to be discovered, and it's happening all the time everywhere. And there's so many free events as well, so there's always something to do here. But also, if you really don't want to do that, you can just stay home and chill. I think there are so many cute little pockets and neighborhoods within New York City that are out there for you to discover and fall in love with. I really like my neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I'll just like walk out and go to a coffee shop that's down the block, or I'll go pick up pizza. I am now preparing for something very exciting happening tonight. I'm hosting a Shabbos supper club, and I just like invite some of my Jewish friends over, and I'll make challah and stuff. So I figured now would be a good time to sit, answer some of the questions, Jewish oriented questions that y'all had for me. So one of them is, what is your favorite vegan traditional Jewish dish to make this time of year? I made a vegan matzo ball soup for the first time like last week, and it was so good, and it now will absolutely be in my rotation. So thus far that has been my favorite vegan, like, I guess holiday specific food. But outside of that, I love making challah. Mostly love eating it, but also love making it as well. Another question, I want to know your favorite Jewish holidays or rituals / traditions, etc. Favorite traditions, I love Passover, not because I'm not allowed to eat bread. Hate that part, don't really do that part. Don't tell anyone. I just really appreciate being able to like sit down with your family or your friends and like go through the order of the story. You retell the story over the dinner. It's a very food oriented holiday. A lot of the foods represent different things. So there is like, you're supposed to take some parsley and dip it in salt water and eat that, and that represents the bitter, the tears that we cried. Honestly, any holiday where we get to eat good food is a good holiday for me. I will check in with you all when I have my next set of questions. So I had the intention when I made this video of like answering these questions while I was out and about in New York City, and I'm pretty sure every video I filmed has just been me sitting in my apartment answering questions. Sorry about that. I'm drinking coffee from an old candle jar and I'm gonna answer some questions. The questions that everyone's really been waiting for, which are the spicy questions. Starting off, have you been on any interesting dates recently? I've been on so many terrible dates that I started a list on my phone of all the dates I've gone on. I don't want to show it to you because I don't want anyone screenshotting it and knowing how many terrible dates I've been on. It's well over 30. Okay, so there was one date that I went on recently. It started off like just okay vibes. We like had just sat down on the park, literally like I met him 30 minutes before. I was like, oh, I'm so hungry, I'm glad you brought snacks, and he was like, oh, me too, I haven't eaten anything today, I'm like anorexic. And then he started laughing, and I was like, you know what, I just met him I'm gonna let this one slide. At the end of the date, we were walking back, and at one point he like asked to hold my hand to like cross the street for safety purposes, and I was just like, okay. So I like held his hand for 4 seconds. It was weird. So that wasn't a terrible date, but that was a bad date that I had recently. Okay, moving on. What's my hottest hot take? Probably not a hot take, but I don't think guns should be allowed. I mean, I know some people use guns specifically for hunting purposes and like to sustain themselves, so I'm not talking about them necessarily, but like a few days ago was the shooting in like a Michigan high school, and there was like a literal kid, like I don't know, it was 16 or 17 years old, who just shot up the school. Like 4 kids died, teenagers. And the fact that like it keeps happening, the notion that these kids' parents just like sent their kids off to school as though it was just a normal day, and then they never got to see their children again. That's so fucking heartbreaking. How can you hear a story like that and not be like, we should really be stricter about our gun standards here? For a lot of people that's a hot take. I don't think that's a hot take, but I'm sure there will be some comments on this video in response to that. Have I ever gotten into a shouting match? I only get into shouting matches with my family because we're French, and that's it. But I don't yell at any of my friends, and none of my friends yell at me, and if they do, then I'm not friends with them for very long. This one's funny. What quality do you find most sexually attractive that isn't sexual at all? I have a thing for people with really nice teeth. It's definitely like +1 or 2 hotness points. It's just a thing for me. So that's that. I realized I never filmed an outro for this video, so I hope you learned something about me that you didn't know before, or you laughed a little bit. But yeah, thank you for being here and sharing your time with me, and I hope to see you all again soon. Bye.